the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verses 11 through 21, the second half of the text that Tim read so beautifully for us earlier. Before I read the text, today we celebrate the good news that we have a shepherd, a good shepherd who is trustworthy and who is adept and skilled at leading us through the challenges and opportunities of life. What a beautiful song Rick sang. Rick, thank you. A beautiful and powerful message on trusting in the Good Shepherd. Before I read the text, let me thank you once again for your faithfulness on a rainy and wet Sunday morning. And also take the opportunity to remind us, those of us gathered and those of us who've joined online, that next week marks the beginning of Holy Week. I hope that you're advancing in your Lenten journey. Holy Week is the most significant week out of the year for those who are followers of Jesus because we retrace the steps of Jesus from his entry into Jerusalem until his exit from the tomb. More than any other time of the year, those who are outside the church and not yet believers think about God and what faith in God might look like. So let me encourage you to be present on Palm Sunday, Maundy, Thursday, and Easter Sunday, and to invite a friend to join you in worship. As we celebrate the good news of the Good Shepherd, the second half of this text dives into the abundant life that Jesus came to bring. In verse 11, he says, I am the Good Shepherd, and the Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and turns away. The wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, Jesus said. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This is the command I receive from my Father. The Jews who heard these words were divided. Many of them said, he is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him? But others said, these are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? Over 12 years ago, Amanda and I made our first trip to England. A couple of years later, went back to Scotland on what was our bucket list golf trip. We had moved out of St. Andrews, which was very tame and civil, and moved to the countryside to play a course north of Aberdeen. We had approached the second tee box, getting ready to hit, when I heard a stirring behind me, and I knew that she was still in the cart. I turned to see who the stranger was, to discover that an entire flock of sheep was standing behind the tee box, watching me tee off, without a fence or a shepherd in sight. But it doesn't mean there wasn't one. It means they were comfortable being where they were. And it was the most unusual audience I've ever had. Well, in John 10, there are three movements. And if you tune out of messages quickly, hear these 3 points. That is that there's a warning about the thief, also called in some translations the hireling. There is the declaration Jesus made that I am the good shepherd. And there's the invitation to abundant life. Let's take a few important minutes to flesh that out. I'm interested in sheep because I grew up in North Alabama, the land of kudzu and cattle. there were no sheep to be found, at least not till after my college days, when there were a couple of farms that had a few sheep and a few llama. But I think the same is true here in Georgia. This isn't sheep country. But yet, it's important to understand the role that sheep and the shepherd played in the life of the Old Testament church. It's interesting to know that today, in 2023, there are approximately 1 billion sheep in the world. And 5 million call the United States of America home. And if you look up any vocational website, shepherding is still a valid vocation. There are fewer percentage-wise because of the hard work of sheep dogs. But interestingly, in today's world, 68.2% of shepherds are women. And 31.8% are men. So my thought was, wow, what a change from Jesus' day. And I went back into the biblical history archives and discovered that in Jesus' day, approximately 50% of the shepherds were women. And whatever that says, it says to me that the under-shepherd of the church, being a pastoral presence, used this metaphor of being the under-shepherd under the good shepherd, that Jesus certainly would have been thinking about men and women who filled that role in his day. In John 10, Jesus refers to himself as, for the very first time, as the Good Shepherd, a shepherd who can be trusted and one who provides guidance for both the green pastures of life and the tough terrain of life. In John 10, the gospel writer calls on the time-honored vocation of shepherd to describe the way Jesus relates to people, specifically his followers and also his future followers. This chapter points out the lure and the intent of the hireling or the thief who uses the tactics of dishonesty and deceit to entrap even the most faithful among Jesus' followers. And the chapter concludes with the Good Shepherd trying to lead his followers toward what's called a good and meaningful and full life. It's almost like Psalm 23 that begins, "The Lord is my shepherd." King James said, "I shall not want." Other translations say, "I shall never go lacking." That Jesus' response to that was to give abundant life to those he was shepherding. What do we learn from this text about the Good Shepherd? What do we learn about how the Good Shepherd aims to lead us toward this meaningful and abundant life? In a day of worry and a day of uncertainty, in a day of high anxiety and at times even downright depression, it's important that people of faith revisit not only Psalm 51, which reminds us of how God restores the joy of our salvation, but to take a closer look at John 10 to remind us of the very essence and character and content of abundant life. First, just like the text, we must learn to be alert for rustlers, thieves, and scammers. In John 10, anyone who tries to lead you toward a different way of life is a thief and a robber. Now, put it in context for a moment. Jesus isn't talking about some far-fetched philosopher down at the university. He's talking to the Pharisees, who were the epitome of religious legalism in his day. And he's referring to them as being the thief and the robber. They've stolen the joy. They've created more rules than God created himself. Jesus goes on to describe this thief or hireling as though it is a chameleon who can take on 1,000 different disguises and comes to steal, to kill, and destroy. To kill what? To destroy what? To steal what? To steal the joy of life. To kill the dreams of life. To destroy your will to serve with fullness and faithfulness. I'm not sure about you, but in just the past few months, actually since December, at our house, my email has been both hacked and phished. Our bank account has been defrauded and robbed. And week before last, we learned our credit card had been compromised and placed in someone else's digital wallet, and we were paying for their monthly movies and books and Amazon purchases. It started in August. It was done so subtly that we didn't even know it was there. To be scammed or phished. A scam is that which is intended to make you believe one version of reality, while another version of reality is actually true. So Jesus seems to be saying that the adversary, the thief in this passage, keeps us so distracted and life so disruptive that we don't really engage in the abundant life. We become knotted in worry and anxiety and despair. So Jesus' first words to his disciples were, be alert for rustlers, thieves, and scammers. And then he declares that he, the Good Shepherd, Jesus came to bring, and I love the words in the NIV, real and eternal life. The King James says abundant life. Other translations say a full and meaningful life. One paraphrase says Jesus came that we might live life to the maximum. In John 10:10 in the Message, it says, I came so that they can have real and eternal life, more and better life than they ever dreamed of. That's God's will. That's God's intent for us. And anything short of that is because we've taken a detour or we've been distracted. This real life Jesus talks about in John's Gospel stands in stark contrast to the imitation of life represented by the thief. When I was serving as a therapist at the counseling center before you so kindly called and asked me to serve alongside you during this season that has been so full of surprises and yet rich relationships. When I was serving as a therapist, I thought that I would be doing mostly marriage and family therapy and dealing with pastors who were suffering from burnout and depression. I'd been serving about 2 to 3 months when they asked if I would be the designated pastoral counselor for the Florida Baptist Convention. And the convention provided 5 sessions of therapy that they paid for any pastor, pastor's spouse, or pastor's child that was going through a dilemma. Without giving away confidentialities, I was overwhelmed by the number of pastors, pastors' wives, and pastors' children who were addicted to pornography. And maybe there's more of that story to be told at a later date. I think there are a lot of reasons for that, but my issue wasn't to figure out the reasons for it as much as to help them find a creative way to address it. And to get back to the root of what pornography really is. When you and I think of pornography, we think of something that is risque and should be left in an intimate setting. But the word itself refers to an illusion, a false image. It's the creation of a picture where all the blemishes are removed. It takes a life that's imperfect and makes it look perfect, so you become addicted to the perfect representation of what is imperfect in real life. And what Jesus is essentially saying is that this pornography of life, this idea that everyone else's life is better and richer, wealthier, more meaningful, and happier than your life, is a false representation. And oftentimes when we compare ourselves to other people, we are comparing ourselves to an illusion. In this idea about pornography, you become addicted to what is not real, and so you have trouble finding gratification and fulfillment in what is real because you are obsessed with that which is not real. Well, here in John 10, the thief brings to us an illusion that says buying a new car will make you happy. That's not true. An illusion that says becoming more attractive makes you more superior to a less attractive person. That's not true. Because you're successful, you're a better person. That's not necessarily true. If you win the game, if you win the tournament, if you get first place in the competition, you have arrived. That's not true. This is all an illusion because it tells you that you are more than what you are. When abundant life begins when we become comfortable in our own skin and we follow the leadership of the shepherd. And everything else becomes an added bonus. And there are people who are wealthier than you and I will ever be, more attractive than you and I will ever be, who win more first place ribbons than you and I will ever win, but they don't know the Good Shepherd, and their life is miserable and chaotic. And life for them is an illusion. Jesus came to bring, and I love the phrase, real and eternal life. Not life that begins in the sweet by and by when life is over, but life that begins now. Abundant life where we're equipped to deal with the challenges of life with faith and hope and courage, even during dark times. He goes on to say, Jesus is the good shepherd who leads us in all circumstances. By the way, the job description of a shepherd is to protect, know, and guide the sheep. 3 points of a shepherd's job description. And Jesus is basically saying, my job is to protect you. My job is to know you and know every detail of your life. And my job is to guide you so that you do not falter. The shepherd here is so acquainted with the sheep that he customizes a plan for our life that's better than any plan that we can dream up for ourselves. That's the reason we constantly say that we should be synchronizing and aligning with God's will and putting aside our personal preferences, because oftentimes our personal preferences individually and corporately are the very things that lead us astray. We begin to think that my plan for my life has to be better than God's plan, and if I can just convince God that my plan's better than His, I've won. There are churches out there that just, if God would just see that our way is better. We got it together, God. We just want you to bless it. And I'm always reminded of the words of our friend Reggie McNeil, who said, the Spirit's at work in the world, and it's the job of the church to get on board with the Spirit, not the job of the Spirit to get on board with the church. Jesus is the good shepherd who leads us in all circumstances. Psalm 23 indicates that the shepherd leads us beside still waters, quiet, pastoral, serene, and leads us through the valley of the shadow, challenging, tough, at times even catastrophic. The good news is that the shepherd still leads us through both opportunities and obstacles, good times and bad times, mountaintops and valleys. And the shepherd is so acquainted with the terrain that he knows exactly where the landmines are. The problem with some of us is that we go our own way and plow right into the landmines, which blow up our dreams, when the better path is to follow the good shepherd. Even in the Great Commission, Jesus told his disciples to go and teach all nations, and then reminded them, this isn't going to be easy, but I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Which leads us finally to the understanding that Christian discipleship is actually the process of becoming acquainted and familiar with the voice of the shepherd. There are a lot of good definitions for discipleship: learning, growing in our faith, learning the ways of Jesus, following the ways of Jesus, recovering from our own mistakes. But in John 10, Christian discipleship is the process of becoming familiar with his voice. Learning the voice of the shepherd is one of the most important spiritual disciplines. Let me try very quickly to both share a story and explain something, because I think this will be helpful to some of us in our daily life and applicable to our spiritual life. In recent months, I have gotten over 3 dozen phishing emails from those of you in the room. Let me explain. Phishing, Phishing. It's often confused with a scam. And without going into great detail, maybe we need a workshop on this later on, but the difference between a scam email and a phishing email is a scam email is when someone actually gets into your account, they get your password, and they defraud you. A phishing email is a hint, and it's dangling bait for which you bite. So I'm looking at Coach Raines. He's had 3 of them recently and struggled with them. Some of you won't ask for a show of hands, but almost everybody in the room. So I get an email from Coach Raines. He's off in a foreign land, broke down, needs money. I did wonder if it were true. No, none of us knew we knew it was false, so we think, and I think our account has been hacked. No, the account hadn't been hacked, because if you look at it carefully, the name on the account says Eddie Raines. But when you look at the email address was actually something different. It was ermaria@hotmail.de. And the way you tell a difference in a scam and a phishing email is it puts the name of someone you know, but if you don't look at the address, it puts a false address to make you think it's them in distress needing your help. What Jesus is trying to say is that the thief doesn't have any power over you except to lure you into believing something that's not true. And so the thief will fish, P-H-I-S-H, fish you out of the joy of life, will fish you out of a full and meaningful life, will fish you out of abundant life. And then he says, the important thing is, I know my sheep, but it's important that they know my voice. Now, I saw Jacob somewhere back here in the back a while ago. The best dating advice I can give you, Jacob, is make sure that if you're like me and your girlfriend, now wife, and her sister and her mother have the same voice pattern, make sure you know which one you're talking to on the phone. So when Amanda and I were dating, I knew that she and her mom and sister, they sounded just alike. But I called one day, and the voice on it said, hello. I said, what are you doing? Well, she told me what she was doing. And I said, what are you going to do this afternoon? She starts telling me this stuff, and something was just a little off. And then I heard this cackle of laughter, and it was Amanda's sister, Michelle. I'm just glad I said, wasn't that a big, juicy kiss I gave you last night? And when she started laughing, I knew I had the wrong sister. But here's the deal. We've been married 37 years, and I talk to her sister all the time. She comes to visit. She has a wonderful sister. I don't even confuse their voices anymore, and people who don't know them still think they sound alike, but I know the intricacies of their voice because I've been listening for so long. And the only way to recognize the voice of the shepherd is to listen, and listen intently, and listen repetitively, and to realize that both the content and tone of the shepherd's voice confirm you're with the good shepherd. And if that voice is leading you to do something other than what's taught in Scripture, it's not the shepherd. If that voice is teaching you to have your own way, it's not the shepherd. If that voice is leading you astray, it's not the shepherd. And so Christian discipleship is becoming more and more acquainted, intimately acquainted with the voice of the shepherd. Jesus referred to himself as the good shepherd, one who can be trusted and one who provides guidance for both the green pastures and the tough terrain of life. Andy Andrews, the motivational speaker from down at Orange Beach, Alabama, loves to say, life itself is a privilege. But to live life to the fullest, that is a choice. To live life to the fullest, that is a choice. And it's a decision we must make each and every day. Lloyd Ogilvie, Presbyterian pastor at Hollywood Presbyterian Church for years and chaplain of the United States Senate, loved to tell the story about the first time he went to the Middle East and he encountered a flock of sheep. And he was amazed. The sheep were of all colors, different shapes, sizes, and it was getting toward the end of the day, and all of a sudden, he heard a cackle of voices over in the corner near the sheep pen, and there were 4 different shepherds screaming out at the sheep. And the sheep began to get in different lines all on their own, because every one of the sheep recognized the voice of their specific shepherd. And he said, that evening I stayed and spent time with the shepherds, and when the sheep went in the pen, they laid down around the perimeter of the pen. The gate was left open, but they were relaxed because they were in the presence of the shepherd who was going to protect them, who knew them by name, and who was going to guide them into the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. The good news of the gospel is Jesus said, I've come that you might have life, and you might have life abundant and free. Let me urge you to choose life. And not just any version of life, but to choose the full and rich and meaningful life that Jesus came to give. And if you'd like to have more conversation about that kind of life, you can text JOIN to the number on the screen, and one of our ministers would call and talk with you about joining forces with the family of God. If you're here in the room and would like to have a conversation about your faith, your baptism, following today's services, our ministers will be located in the front and here near the altar in the Peachtree Room, and we'd love to have a conversation with you about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. There's an age-old song that says, footsteps of Jesus, they lead me where'er I go. We celebrate our faith and make our commitments as we stand together to sing these great words along with Rick. Let's stand and sing.